democratic societies that are able to realize their potential are in any way a cockamamie idea. I believe it is exactly what the people of Cuba, Iran, Burma, Belarus, North Korea, and other authoritarian nations need to help them communicate with each other, to help them achieve USAID's stated mission of a, quote, free, peaceful, and self-reliant society with an effective, legitimate government. So I commend you for helping people have a less controlled platform to talk to each other, for helping them to find a way to connect and to share their views. Global Internet freedom programs, U.S. international broadcasting, and support for human rights activists are all fundamental components of our country's long-standing efforts to promote democracy overseas. For more than 50 years, the United States has had an unwavering commitment to promote freedom of information in the world. Our work in Cuba is no different than our efforts to promote freedom of expression and uncensored access to information in the Ukraine, Russia, Belarus, Iran, China, or North Korea. It should be noted that in the fiscal year 14 Senate Foreign Operations Bill, there is $76 million set aside to promote global Internet freedom and democracy in closed societies like Cuba, where the regime allows no independent press and limits access to the Internet. It also states that, quote, with respect to the provision of assistance for democracy, human rights, and governance activities, that these programs, quote, shall not be subject to the prior approval by the government of any foreign country. It's common sense that we shouldn't ask the government of Iran or Egypt or China for permission to support advocates of free speech, human rights, or political pluralism, or to provide uncensored access to the Internet or social media. At the end of the day, just giving people the opportunity to communicate with the outside world and with each other is, in my mind, a fundamental responsibility of any democracy program. As Bill Gates said, quote, the Internet is becoming the town square for the global village of tomorrow. And he's right. But to go one step further, the town square will become more free and inclusive thanks to the democracy efforts of organizations like USAID. And let me just close on this one point. I think it is dumb, and even dumber to go ahead and suggest that there can be freedom, and we should seek freedom of Internet access and freedom of expression globally, but that somehow the people of Cuba don't deserve the same freedom. And I will finally say on this topic, there is only one entity responsible for the imprisonment of Alan Gross, and that is the Cuban regime. It is not this government, it is not AID, it is the Cuban regime. And I'm tired of blaming ourselves when the entity that should be blamed is the regime that unlawfully holds an American in prison for doing nothing but having the Jewish community in Cuba be able to communicate with each other. It's pretty outrageous. Now, finally, with reference to the overall priorities of the budget, we look forward to your perspective on how we can make certain that U.S. development assistance is aligned with overall U.S. foreign policy, and I look forward to hearing about your priorities for the fiscal year 2015 AID budget. I know I speak for all of the members when I say how impressed I've been by your creativity and energy, which has been essential to USAID reform and to your agency's pursuit of international development priorities in ways that focus on best practices and results. As we have discussed on numerous occasions before, I do, however, as I said to the Secretary when he was here, remain deeply concerned about the resources for the Western Hemisphere. They are insufficient to meet the challenges of the region and its importance to our own economic prosperity, security, and our shared interests in health and development. So that is something that we look forward to continuing to engage you on. And while efforts to address the challenges of domestic and transnational criminal networks pose the greatest short-term threat to stability in the region, a long-term strategy that boosts economic growth and consolidates the rule of law is fundamental, and it is, in my view, currently lacking. So I believe we can do better in the hemisphere, and I think we can do better in meeting within that context our international development priorities within the hemisphere. I look forward to an ongoing conversation with you about how we get the best results more broadly for USAID, for foreign assistance, for donors, for NGOs, for the taxpayers. And now I'd like to recognize the Ranking Republican Senator Corker.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for those passionate comments. And Mr. Shaw, we appreciate you being here and all the work you do around the world. And my comments are going to be a little more brief. We look forward to your testimony. But look, I think it's we appreciate you being here to go over your budget request for 2015. We appreciate the reforms that you're trying to put in place around the world, but also within USAID itself. I think, you know, foreign aid is one of the most misunderstood concepts that the American people have sometimes. And the fact is we spend 1% of our overall U.S. budget on foreign assistance and foreign aid and foreign activities, non-kinetic, I might add. But I would like for you to sort of herald some of those successes. I know you're going to do that today, but I think it's also our responsibility to have some healthy skepticism regarding some of the programs. I really appreciate what you're trying to do with the food programs to make them much more efficient, and look forward to talking with you about that. I know there's some other programs where we're going to be dealing 30% with local entities, and well, in one way, that's a much appreciated concept. On the other hand, I know we want to make sure we have results from that. But thank you for being here today. We look forward to the questions and certainly your testimony, and we thank you for your work.
Minister Ashore, the floor is yours. We'll enter your full statement in the record without objection. We'd ask you to summarize it more or less in about 5 minutes or so that members could have an opportunity to have a dialogue.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Menendez and Ranking Member Corker. I want to thank you specifically for your very strong leadership and your support for America's development programs around the world and ensuring that they're a full reflection of our values. I want to thank all the members of the committee for your guidance, counsel, support, and oversight in these past years, and I'm honored to be here to present the President's fiscal year 2015 budget request for USAID, which totals just above $20 million. This resource and this investment is a core part of keeping our country safe and secure over the long term and improving our own domestic prosperity as the world prospers with us. Our mission is to end extreme poverty and to promote resilient democratic societies. Our efforts over the last few years with your support have constituted a serious rebuilding of this agency. During my tenure, we've hired more than 1,100 staff, rebuilt a capacity to manage budgets, projected policy priorities in food, energy, education, water, and health, and expanded our partner base to include more local organizations, companies, faith-based institutions, universities, scientists, and students, in addition to our valued traditional NGO and contracting partners. We've expanded our capacity to evaluate all of our major programs. When I started, there were a few dozen evaluations put forth every year. This year we'll have nearly 280, with more than 50% of them used to make course corrections in how programs are implemented, and with all of them being open and publicly available. Our efforts have constituted a new model of development that engages the private sector, science and technology, faith institutions, and others in new types of partnerships. And we believe these partnerships are delivering results. President Obama's Feed the Future program, which is represented with nearly $1 billion in this budget request, now reaches 7 million small-scale farmers in 19 countries. This year, 12.5 million children will no longer be hungry because they are in families that are beneficiaries of Feed the Future. Our investment is matched and in some cases exceeded by private sector partners who have committed $3.7 billion to this effort. And I want to thank the committee for its leadership in supporting incremental food aid reforms that will help us reach an additional 800,000 children in the context of disasters around the world this year. Our efforts to support and save children's lives, especially children who die unnecessarily under the age of 5, are supported in this budget with a $2.7 billion budget request. Between 1990 and today, every year we save more than 5 million children from dying under the age of 5. We've set for ourselves a similar goal of saving 6 million kids a year by 2030 and mobilize the global community to work with us to achieve those goals. In education, water, energy, and many other sectors of the economy, we work in a results-oriented way, and I look forward to that discussion today. Last week, I was in the Philippines with Secretary Hagel, working with ASEAN defense ministers on how we can coordinate humanitarian relief efforts more effectively and helping them build the capacity to be great partners in dealing with disasters. This budget request includes more than $3 billion for disaster assistance in places like Syria, Central African Republic, and South Sudan. Our investments in democracy, human rights, and governance are an important part of what we do all around the world. This past weekend, we noted with some initial success an election in Afghanistan that saw nearly 60% voter turnout and a very large proportion, more than expected, of women. Those efforts were supported by the United States and other international partners and led by Afghan institutions themselves. Our work in our own hemisphere is of particular importance. And while budgets have been tight, and this budget does make trade-offs, we have now launched a U.S. Global Development Lab that brings businesses, scientists, technologists, and universities together. And I believe in the Latin America region in particular, we're starting to see some interesting results. We closed an interesting leveraged partnership in which we will spend $5.7 million to motivate local banks to commit $133 million to small-scale farmers and producers in agricultural lands in Colombia, Peru, and Guatemala. That kind of leverage and that kind of scale is what's possible if we do things in a more creative and effective way. Let me close just by saying thank you. I had the opportunity this year, and I was honored to deliver the speech at the National Prayer Breakfast. And it reminded me that when we come together to serve the world's most vulnerable people, this is an issue that can cut across partisan divides, bring us together as a nation, and allow us to continue our proud heritage over past decades as the world's humanitarian development and global health leader. Thank you.
Thank you, Administrator. Let me start off where the one concern that I had, which is the Western Hemisphere. Almost every major account in USAID's FY15 budget for the Western Hemisphere will be cut relative to past years. Venezuela will be cut by 14%, even amidst the current crisis. Haiti, Colombia, Guatemala, all will be cut by 20%. Now, I don't underestimate the problems we face in the world, but I do think we underestimate the problems we face in our own hemisphere. We have enormous challenges in Central America with one of the highest homicide rates in the world. We have challenged governments in terms of meeting that challenge and rule of law issues. We have still in Mexico some states that are relatively lawless near the frontier border with the United States. We have the challenge of Venezuela and a growing set of circumstances there where civil society is under siege. And in Ecuador, we have basically, because of the government, closed our missions. And so I just see a wide range of issues. And I understand that some of these countries have sort of like graduated. But by the same token, what happens is instead of looking for other investment opportunities in the hemisphere, the money is sent to other parts of the world. And we have now seen year over year, double-digit cuts that, from my perspective, are not sustainable. So can you commit to me that you'll work with us, as the Secretary said he would, to see how we change this dynamic, because I think that in our own hemisphere, in our own front yard, there are challenges that are both in our national interest on so many different questions, from security to drug interdiction to economic opportunity to health care issues that know no borders when it comes to diseases. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, thank you, Senator, and I appreciate that point of view and agree with the central nature and importance of the region. While we have made tough trade-offs over the last many years, as Secretary Kerry noted and as President Obama has said, this region is of critical importance to our future from a trade, immigration, and partnership perspective. And as a result, we are trying to position our programs in such a way that, especially as countries get wealthier and move into middle income and middle upper income status, our programs shift to engaging more public-private partnerships, and we're doing more creative and technical partnerships in lieu of, in some cases, slightly lower resources. In particular, I'm proud of the fact that our Development Credit Authority team has dramatically expanded the number of loan guarantees we provide to local banks, whether it's in El Salvador, where we've now allowed Banco Davivienda to open $25 million of lending for small-scale businesses, or in Nicaragua, or in Mexico, where I will be next week to meet with some of these partners. We are making real progress in helping to unlock local finance using our credit guarantees in a highly leveraged way. I'd like for us to be able to do a lot more of that. Similarly, as we've reprioritized science, technology, and innovation, we have a host of new and improved partnerships with businesses and research institutions throughout the region. One I would just note is an innovative partnership with Starbucks to help them reach 25,000 small-scale farmers in Colombia, in previously FARC-affected communities, so that they can bring better prices to the farm gate, economic value, and build supply chains that enhance economic opportunity while also supporting their own presence there. So we're trying to evolve into those types of partnerships, and I think the region can become a model for that new model of development and developmental partnership, especially in countries that are moving up the income scale.
Well, I appreciate that innovative thought, and I welcome it, but we're also looking at some of these other challenges in the hemisphere, so we will continue to engage with you in that respect. In the Ukraine, the language passed by this committee in the Senate and the House, signed by the President, asked state and AID to reprogram assistance to the Ukraine. $50 million to be budgeted for the improvement of democratic governance, rule of law, and free elections, among other things, and $100 million for security assistance spread over the next 3 fiscal years. Where are you in the process of reprogramming this assistance, and when would you expect it to get to Ukraine, and when do you believe the USAID mission director signing the bilateral agreement with the Ukrainian government, which will transfer the $1 billion in loan guarantees we authorized in the same law, will take place? Do you have any sense of the timeframes there?
Well, sir, I'd appreciate the chance to come back to you on the specific question of the bilateral agreement and the loan guarantee, but our acting deputy, Mark Fierstein, and Paige Alexander, our assistant administrator, are actually in the Ukraine right now. They're working with civil society groups and groups that are supporting the election process. I'd note that some of our partners there were critical to documenting some of the human rights abuses that took place in the 45-day period during the protests. Our economic portfolio is being restructured to support the implementation of and moving forward with the IMF agreement, so that Ukraine can get access to tens of billions of dollars of IMF resources. We're helping them with technical support to change the fuel subsidy structure and the future of their energy security policy, and a number of other areas where that kind of economic technical assistance has been requested. But we've had a proud and significant history of working in Ukraine. We've delivered, I think, very important results, and we look forward to continuing to do that at a higher level now, given some repositioning of resources and given the very strong support of the committee.
Finally, I understand that AID plans to incentivize up to $100 million in on-budget funding based on benchmarks set through the Tokyo Mutual Accountability Framework. And I think that's an important initiative that deserves highlighting. In a time of constrained budgets, accountability for the funds in Afghanistan will only grow in importance. What hard deliverables will we be emphasizing in discussions with the incoming Afghan government? What are some of our goals? What are some of the challenges there?
So, first, thank you, Senator, for your leadership in supporting our programs in Afghanistan. For 2 to 3% of the total cost of the war, we think we've delivered tremendous and important results that create the basis of a more stable and secure society going into the future. We were part of an international conference effort at Tokyo a year and a half ago to bring together all the international partners and create a set of conditions that the Afghan government would have to meet in order to receive the full amount of committed development assistance, not just from the United States, but the UK, Australia, Japan, all of the international partners speaking with one voice. Some of those benchmarks include anti-corruption activities that are clear and transparent and effective. They included the conduct of free and fair elections and the peaceful transition of power. They include collecting more customs revenue and using their domestic collection of revenue to replace developmental assistance over the long term, and we've seen a 360% increase on that benchmark. And there are 7 or 8 other critical ones that include protecting women's and girls' rights and access to school and education for young girls in particular. And so our community meets twice a year to assess their performance, and we intend to make some shared determinations after an assessment conducted with the new government.
Senator Corker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, Mr. Shaw, thank you for being here. I know you and I have talked a great deal about the Food for Peace program, and I know that it's being partially implemented, but I think we all know that due to parochial interest, we're really not delivering food aid in the way that we need to as a country. The goal is to alleviate suffering for people who are starving and malnourished. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that and what you'd like to see fully happen relative to our food programs.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you for your leadership on this critical issue. America has, through Food for Peace, which USAID implements, over the last 50 years served more than 3 billion people and providing them food assistance when they need it. Because of nearly every other country that provides food assistance has made a shift to purchasing food locally and to providing cash resources to institutions like the World Food Program so they can buy and deliver in the most efficient way.
And that empowers those local countries to be far more self-sufficient over the long haul. Is that correct?
It absolutely does.
It raises a standard of living in those countries when we do that, right?
Yes.
How many more people could be actually served if we would move fully to this kind of program, which I think anybody would say is, from the standpoint of what we're trying to do, makes more sense than what we're now doing, where we're shipping U.S. products overseas to places and never building up that independence that we'd like to see happen over time. How many more people would be served?
This year's budget proposal calls for 25% flexibility in the program, and that 25% correlates to 2 million additional children who would receive food at times of crises. Those are kids and women and men inside of Syria, in Oman, and in Lebanon, in Central African Republic, in South Sudan, and in Afghanistan.
And if we did it fully, how many more people would be served?
I haven't made the 100% estimates, but our team would be.
We've done an estimate, and we think it's 7 to 9 million more people each year would be served if we'd move away from the constraints that we now have. By ensuring that instead of, again, building up the independence, helping the local economies, which is what this is all about, we would, and I guess we also have preferred shippers. Would you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, the way the shipping contracting system works relies on a handful of core partners. They've been important partners over the course of the program, and the President's proposal, which is an incremental proposal, maintains an important role for American farmers, food producers, and shippers. We're simply asking for a little bit of additional flexibility so we can meet the needs of beneficiaries at a time when humanitarian caseloads are higher than they've ever been and our budgets are constrained.
Another program you have underway is USAID Forward, and we've asked for a GAO study on that. And again, this is along similar lines in many ways. I think your goal is to contract 30% of your activities at the local level. One of the concerns we have, though, is that right now the way you're tracking that is you're tracking how much money you're spending, but you're not tracking outcomes, as I understand it, to see that even though the money may be 30% going there, are we getting the same kind of results? Now, this is a different kind of effort than the food aid program I was talking about. This is actually contracting with people to carry out the work that USAID is underway with. Could you talk to us a little bit about that, and do you have similar concerns, by the way, that we're only measuring money out, we're not measuring results?
Well, I would just reframe that a little bit, Senator, because I think USAID Forward is intended to cover a range of reforms that allow us to be a better and more efficient partner, allow us to be more efficient, and ultimately and critically allow us to be better at reporting on core results. And so that is a package of reforms that includes a number of things to move us in that direction, and I think we've proven we've been able to do that. I will say I believe the GAO review is focused specifically on this shift to including more local NGOs and local institutions. And I would have hoped that they might have broadened the analysis, because if you do broaden the analysis to the full set of reforms, what you'd find is, unlike a few years ago, today I can sit here and say we're reaching 7 million farmers, moving 12.5 million kids out of hunger through our agriculture efforts, that our child survival programs are saving millions of lives a year. And that ability to quantify and report on those results is also a part of USAID Forward. I'd also note that our progress against our goals in moving to local institutions has been, as designed, incremental. And we think we're doing this at a pace that is responsible. But the ultimate goal is to build enough institutional capacity locally so that American aid and assistance is not needed over the very long run. And we want to build that self-sufficiency so that we don't have to be there forever.
One of the important things that we do as a nation is trade capacity building. And again, these are along the lines that I think most people here would like to see, and that is making sure that we're doing on a daily basis everything we can to empower countries that we're working with to be sustainable on their own and not be dependent upon aid forever from the United States. We looked on a website just to try to determine who is really in charge of trade capacity building. There's 24 U.S. agencies involved in that. And I would just ask you, which one really is ultimately responsible for building trade capacity in countries that we're dealing with?
Well, sir, first I think this is a critically important issue. I'd note that we commit nearly $200 million a year specifically to trade capacity building, but frankly far more than that if you look at agricultural trade support in regions in Africa and elsewhere. Michael Froman, the U.S. Trade Ambassador, and I are co-hosting a discussion with a number of our partners to understand how we can together optimize the implementation of the new Bali agreements that create a framework for improved intra-country trade with many of the countries we work in. And President Obama launched Trade Africa last year in Africa based on some extraordinarily strong and independently validated results that showed that for every dollar we invested in trade capacity building and trade transit, we were generating $40 of economic value through our East African trade hub. So the U.S. Trade Representative, myself, and the State Department work in close coordination. USAID probably provides most of the financing for these activities.
But I think the concern is, and again, you're one of the most reform-minded leaders of this organization we've ever had, and I think we all applaud those efforts. But I think the concern is there's not really one person or a small group of people that's driving this. And as you mentioned, I mean, it's incredibly important, and there's so much that we can do without much money to really empower these countries to be involved in trade that, again, goes on forever versus what we're doing relative to aid. So who is there a way that you think, maybe you're not going to answer this today in this setting, but is there a way you would work with us to help figure out who actually is in charge and responsible and accountable for these activities, so it has a focus that gets us to a place that we'd all like to go?
We absolutely would like to work with you. I will just say the way it currently works is USA takes responsibility for the implementation of these programs and reporting on the results, ensuring they're effectively designed. And the U.S. Trade Representative, of course, leads the trade negotiations that create opportunities for these programs to be effective and deployed where they're most needed. And it's critical that we're working closely together, and I can report to you with a high degree of confidence that I think that partnership has never been closer.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the hearing, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Cardin.
Administrator Shaw, again, thank you very much for your leadership. Development assistance is a critical part of our national security interest, and the Obama administration has made it clear that our national security budget includes the development assistance programs. You're less than 1% of the federal budget and a very small fraction of the total national security budget. It's very, very important. I particularly want to acknowledge the budget support for East Asia and the Pacific, the subcommittee that I have the opportunity to chair. As I told you before the hearing started, you're working under a very tough budget. The overall budget growth is very much reduced, and you had to make very tough decisions. So I particularly appreciate the priority that's been given to East Asia and the Pacific, consistent with the President's rebalanced Asia, from the Philippines and disaster assistance funds to Burma, democratic institutions. And I might say to Senator Corker, your trade capacity improvement in Laos, there's many countries that are benefiting directly from what you're doing in East Asia and the Pacific. The Lower Mekong Initiative that Secretary Clinton initiated, affecting the countries in that region, not just on the environment, but also on health and also on infrastructure, is a major initiative that I think we can be very proud of. Having said what I did, we want to make sure the aid is done in the most efficient way. And that's why the food aid program reforms that you're instituting, I agree with Senator Corker, are very valuable improvements so that we can reach more people and leverage our dollars further than we do today. And this year, you've started a Global Development Lab, and I want to talk a few moments about that, using science and technology, innovation and development to leverage the monies that we make available to our academic centers that have expertise in this area, that already are engaged in many of the countries that we're engaged in, as well as private companies that also want markets in these countries, so are prepared to make investments. If we work in a coordinated way, we can get a much more effective results and do achieve our development assistance objectives in a more efficient and hopefully a shorter time period. Can you just share with the committee how this program, where you're using existing resources, how you anticipate it operating as you now have launched the Development Lab?
Well, thank you, Senator. Thank you for your leadership on so many issues related to our work and for your personal commitment to food aid reform and to the U.S. Global Development Lab. We are excited to have recently launched the U.S. Global Development Lab. In my time in this role, we have increased our spending on science and technology research and development from about $130 million previously to just over $600 million this year. And we've done that entirely through programmatic trade-offs where we're making the tough choices to move money into this area. What this has allowed us to do is create development innovation laboratories on college campuses across this country. And we're seeing groups of students and faculty and researchers create new technologies like new ways to allow babies to breathe through low-cost continuous positive airway pressure devices. That came from Rice University. The Pratt pouch, which came from the Duke School of Biomedical Engineering, that allows us to store nevirapine in a ketchup-like container, but it's heat-sensitive and safe for up to a year, so women can take that, go to their homes, and when they give birth, take one dose before and one for the child after, and prevent the transmission of AIDS from a mother to a child without being in an assisted medical environment. Those kinds of technological breakthroughs reduce the cost of saving kids' lives, saving mothers' lives, and improve the effectiveness of our efforts.
It also reduces the costs that we would do in direct health services in these countries to deal with babies that are infected.
That's exactly right. And we've also found that big companies across our country and around the world have been eager to partner with us. So now Walmart has joined the lab and is working with us to reach farmers throughout sub-Saharan Africa. Unilever and Procter & Gamble have joined and are providing packets of material that allow us to purify water in places like Burma. And they're donating those, but they're also helping us reach hard-to-reach communities where too many children die just because the water is impure and still has microorganisms in it. These kinds of public-private partnerships, coupled with a real professional science and technology capacity, I think will allow U.S. aid and U.S. development efforts around the world to have a DARPA-like capability to create new technologies, deploy them on behalf of the world's poorest people, and just as importantly, allow young people in this country that want to create entrepreneurial businesses, whether it's making and selling solar-powered flashlights in parts of rural Africa where there's no energy access, or commercializing this CPAP, positive airway pressure device, which they now do for $20 or $30 a device, and we're deploying throughout Malawi. You know, we found a lot of young people are inspired by the opportunity to become inventors and entrepreneurs, but to use that business savvy and skill to actually solve some of the world's most challenging problems.
I think we find it very exciting. You're really leveraging the strength of America in our science and technology and what we've been able to discover and share with the world, as well as our entrepreneurial spirit in our private companies. Leveraging that makes that, these are American values that are being used to help you deal with your objectives and development assistance. Where are the challenges and where can Congress help?
Well, we have requested a series of new authorities from Congress to help us be a little more flexible and modern in how we carry out this work. They include the ability to use program funds to hire specialized individuals with science and business backgrounds, the ability to provide prizes. We've seen that a lot of technological innovation comes out of prize competitions, and then you only spend money on those that are winning, and you are able to motivate hundreds, sometimes thousands of new partners, some you would never otherwise be able to find, to compete for winning prizes on some of those innovation awards. And some flexibilities in how we use our resources in the development assistance account, which is particularly critical to funding this effort, and then, of course, fully funding the USAID budget. So those would be the requests as it relates to this, and I just want to thank members of the committee for the extraordinary efforts you've made to support this new way of working.
Just one final comment. As I understand it, it's basically using existing resources in a more efficient way to accomplish greater results.
That's correct, sir.
Thank you.
Senator Rubio.
Thank you. Thank you for being here and for all of your work. Mr. Director, the USAID is not a charity, right? It is a U.S. agency that promotes humanitarian and development aid around the world, but as part of it, also furthering U.S. interests around the world. So it's a two-way street for us. We're doing what's right, but we're also furthering our national interests, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And so as you get involved in each country, you look at the specific needs. Every country has different needs. Some countries have a lack of access to water. Some countries, women are not treated appropriately or the rights are violated. Every country has different needs. Some have energy problems. And so what USAID aims to do is to go into specific countries, determine what their needs is, and promote those humanitarian causes, but also in a way that furthers U.S. interests. Is that an accurate description?
Yes, our mission is to end extreme poverty and promote resilient democratic societies, because over the long term, accomplishing that mission makes us safer and more secure, and you've articulated that very well.
So with that mission in mind, you have programs, for example, on the island of Cuba that you have been engaged in the past and continue to be. As I understand it, the clearly stated goals of that program, available for every member of this committee and the world to read, is to break the information blockade in Cuba and to promote information sharing, among other stated goals. Those are stated goals of our program and our involvement there, correct?
We have notified Congress in congressional budget justifications and notifications every year since 2008 on the goals of those programs, and we run internet access and freedom of information programs in many parts of the world, including Cuba.
Exactly. So, and the reason why I bring that up, and that rightfully so that you focused on information sharing and so forth, because Cuba, according to Freedom House, is the second most repressive government in the world, only after Iran. In my understanding, it was a very close second after Iran in terms of denying access to information sharing, denying access to the internet. People in Cuba can't go on the internet. I mean, if you're close to the government, you may be able to sneak in an internet access here or there. But the average person on the street cannot go on the internet in Cuba. It's not just a capacity issue, it is prohibited. In fact, I'm going to send out a tweet right now. If I sent this tweet in Cuba, I would be put in jail. Okay? And I'm going to send it right now as an example of what people in Cuba cannot do. People in Cuba cannot do what I'm about to do. And so as a result of that, USAID, as has been revealed in the last few days, but was available for people to see if they were interested in it, USAID had a program called Zunzuneo, which was designed to provide the people of Cuba access to information and to break the information blockade and to allow people to share information. And I want to walk through this. First of all, there's been an insinuation made by some that this program was illegal. But in fact, this program, in my opinion, and I think in yours as well, was completely within the stated mandate, within the stated purpose of your programs in Cuba, to break the information blockade, to promote information sharing. That's accurate, right? That was right within that goal.
We have publicly notified that these programs are designed to enable open communications.
And the other argument I've heard is, well, this was a covert program. But in fact, this program was reviewed by the General Accounting Office, right?
Correct.
And they made no suggestions for changes. They had no criticism of the way the money was being administered.
They actually complimented USAID on improved management oversight of programs.
This wasn't an intelligence program. We weren't spying on the Cuban government using this program.
No.
We weren't selling weapons on this program or somehow arming elements on the ground in Cuba through this program.
No.
So this program basically was allowing Cubans to be able to communicate with other Cubans because their government doesn't let them do that. By the way, in advanced society in the 21st century, people should at least be able to do that, right? But in Cuba, they're not. And so what this program chose to do was to fulfill the mandate of this program as informed by Congress to break the information blockade and to promote information sharing. So I read this article, and it said that at its peak, there were 40,000 users on the program. That's actually not true, right? At its peak, it had 68,000 users. So here's my question. When was the last time that we stopped a program because it was too successful? Because this program, in my mind, is successful. Not only am I glad that we did this program, what I'm upset about is that we stopped. And I don't think we should just stop at Twitter-like programs. I think we should do everything possible. Maybe USAID is not the perfect agency for this, what I'm about to talk about. But I believe we should do everything we can to provide the people of Cuba and other repressed societies full access to the internet so they can go on any website they want. If they want to read Grandma, which is the communist rag in Cuba, they can read it all they want online. And if they want to read the CNN website or the New York Times or Huffington Post or Drudge or whatever they want to read, they should be able to do that as well. I think for everyone who's outraged by this program, when was the last time that undermining a tyranny is counter to the stated purposes of the United States of America? When is the last time that we've been outraged by a government program that undermines a tyranny and provides access to a people of a country to the free flow of information and the ability to talk to each other? I read these quotes in the paper, people setting themselves on fire around here. Oh, this program, I heard one quote was cockamamie. Since when? We have radio broadcasts to Europe during the Cold War. We have radio broadcasts to Cuba right now. Those actually have content in them. All we wanted people to do was to talk to each other. And I want to know, when was the last time that it was against the stated purpose and goals of the United States of America to undermine a tyranny? By the way, a tyranny that we heard testimony here just 3 days ago that is involved in the single greatest violation of UN sanctions against North Korea since they were imposed, a tyranny that votes against us in every international forum, a tyranny that is consistently on the side of every madman and tyrant on the planet. If there was a vote on Syria, they're with Assad. When there was a vote on Libya, they were with Gaddafi. If there was a vote on Russia, they're with Putin. If there's a vote on human rights violations in China, they're with China. Time and again, when was the last time that Cuba, in an international forum, ever lined up on the side of decency and human rights? This is an anti-American government that doesn't just undermine its own people. It tries to undermine our foreign policy aims and the foreign policy aims of the free world. And so my question would be, and I know this is a long-winded question, when do we start this program again? What do we need to do to start not just this program, but expand it so that people in Cuba can do what I just did, and that is speak freely to the world and to each other about the reality of Cuban life and about anything else they want, including the latest record from Beyonce or Jay-Z or what someone wore to the Oscars, whatever they want to write about. When do we start this again?
Senator, I just want to clarify, USAID programs are, as notified, designed to promote open access to information and facilitate communication. Any programs that have further purposes are not implemented by USAID, but rather by other parts of the State Department or the National Endowment for Democracy. In terms of restarting these types of things, you know, we have the FY14 fiscal guidance is pretty clear as to which agencies will be pursuing these activities into the future.
Senator Durbin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I want to follow my colleague and friend, Senator Rubio, and I sure don't quarrel with the premise. Whether it's China or Cuba, opening up information, free exchange of information is so fundamental to our country and so fundamental to what I consider to be the basic values of a democracy. So the critics of this effort, Mr. Shah, I think ought to come up with a better idea. But the notion behind it, the premise, I think is sound. I may go a little further than my colleagues on the committee when I say that after over 50 years of what has been a dubious foreign policy in Cuba by the United States, I have been in favor of opening up as much as we can Cuba to the ideas and people of the world and the United States. That is how communism and the Soviet Union came to an end. They were overwhelmed by reality. I've been to Cuba. They are isolated from reality. If we had more context at the social media level and beyond, I don't think that the current regime could survive, as the communistic regimes did not survive in Eastern Europe. And I want to put in one point here, and I'm sure it's been mentioned earlier. I visited Alan Gross, I think it was 2 years ago now. What a heartbreaking situation. This poor man is being held because he may have brought in equipment that would have brought in more information into Cuba. I don't know specifically whether he did or didn't, but that's the charge, espionage. And what they've done to this poor man is heartbreaking. When you visit with him and see what his life is like today, or meet his wife and family as I have. And I said to the Cuban officials, I have kind of leaned your way in opening up relationships between the United States and Cuba, but you've lost me on Gross. What you've done to this man in closing out his small little effort to bring in some equipment, to me, is just outrageous. And this poor guy is still in prison, hospital prison, or whatever it happens to be, and is going on a hunger strike. I don't know how he keeps his mind about him when he faces this every single day. But I don't disagree with your premise, Senator Rubio. Open it up. The more ideas we can pour into that island, the better, I think, the chance that they'll move toward values that we share. And so those who are critical of this basic approach, give me a better one. Give me something else that will achieve this goal. Mr. Shah, two things that I focused on. One was a legacy from my predecessor, Senator Paul Simon, about water for the world. We've been appropriating money. I know USAID has been focused on it. The other one was child marriage, and we finally passed that as part of the Violence Against Women Act. And I know that there's a program underway in USAID to try to discourage child marriage and all of the awful things which come as a result of it. And I'd like you to comment on those two areas if you could.
Thank you, Senator. First, just thank you for your leadership on water and water for the poor. Thanks in part to your leadership and your predecessors, we have an extraordinary opportunity now to reach 32 million people who would otherwise not have access to clean and reliable sources of water. And when we do, when we succeed, what that means is girls who are usually sent into dangerous environments to fetch water have time and safe places. They avoid being abused and raped and hurt as they're going about those tasks, and they can do things like go to school. And it's an extraordinary accomplishment that I think the Senate should be, and that entire Congress should be very proud of. Between 2009 and 2012, our spending on water relative to the prior four-year period went up from $1.4 billion to $2.4 billion. And the reason we were able to make that extraordinary increase at a time of tight budgets is that as we have focused on investing in those things that deliver the most cost-effective results, save the most lives, and produce the most opportunity, particularly for girls around the world. Investments in water were at near the top of the list, and that's why you've seen that transition and shift. I just want to thank you for your leadership, and I'm proud of the way the agency is focused on measuring results in terms of lives saved from water programs and diarrheal disease reduction in water access and in sanitation access as well. With respect to child marriage and gender-based violence, we have new programs that focus on these issues in particularly high-risk places, but it's just extraordinary, the challenges people face. And I was just in Eastern Congo a few months ago and saw the UN report last week that shows, just 15,000 girls and that have been raped, and it has been a part of how war has been conducted in that part of the world. And I'm proud of the fact that thanks to your support and other members of the committee, the United States leads the world in supporting health services for victims and helping girls get back on their feet and helping people reintegrate into society, in finding economic opportunity, going back to school. And the range of those programs has gone up significantly since Secretary Clinton made a visit to that region, I think now 5 years ago. But I think it's something America can be very, very proud of.
Thank you very much. I might add, too, that I am promoting a product that is made in Chicago. This is a shameless promotion. It's called Porta-Pure. This man has made, he's an engineer in water sanitation. He's made a 6-gallon thermos. Whatever you pour in the top comes out clean drinking water at the bottom in 2 minutes. No chemicals involved. They use nanofiber filters. It sells for about $60 or $70. In Haiti, a family spends about $3.50 a week for a jug of water.
Yeah.
If we could take that into a microcredit situation, in a few weeks they could buy this jug that for 2 years would provide them safe drinking water for their family. So it is one idea. You've mentioned some others, and I hope that your folks will take a look at it. Porta-Pure, one word. And I think if you meet George Page, you'll be very impressed with this man who is trying to change the world one little bit at a time, and I think it's a good effort. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Senator. We set up the U.S. Global Development Lab to help further develop and commercialize and distribute precisely those types of technologies, so we'd be eager to follow up.
Hope you'll look at it. Thanks. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Legitimate in-state promotion, I think, is one of the duties of the United States.
Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. By the way, we've got pretty good water filtration technology center in Milwaukee as well. Probably helped out with that company. Mr. Shaw, welcome. I really enjoyed your keynote at the National Prayer Breakfast, where you made, I think, a very strong case for foreign aid. Unfortunately, not every American got to hear that case. And I think it's also unfortunate that when you take a look at our current budget situation, the enormous pressure we are under, most Americans take a look at foreign aid, and that's the first place they want to cut. So can you just speak a little bit in terms of making that case for foreign aid?
Well, thank you, Senator, and thank you for your leadership. I think what I learned from the opportunity to be at the prayer breakfast this year was that when we come together across different communities of partners, Republicans and Democrats, House and Senate, businesses and entrepreneurs, and very importantly, faith community members who carry out this mission with exactly the right kind of intention of serving those that are least fortunate amongst us, we present a picture to the world of an America that cares about vulnerable people, that cares about countries and societies that have been left out of the tremendous growth and opportunity that has swept over the world over the last several decades, centuries. And when we start to remind Americans of just how much suffering there is out there, that 860 million people will go to bed hungry tonight, that 6.6 million children will die under the age of 5, almost all from simple diseases that could be prevented with pennies per dose types of treatments. People begin to see the opportunity and actually ask us to do more, not less, in our foreign assistance and our development investments. So our priority at USAID has been to demonstrate that the resources the Congress entrusts in us at a difficult fiscal time are deployed as effectively and efficiently as possible. And Congress has helped us a lot rebuilding our agency to do that, but we now evaluate every major program. I can sit here with confidence and describe programs that work and sometimes those that don't, that need to be changed or need to
that's-
evolve.
Senator Johnson, if you would just yield for me to one moment. I'm going to ask Senator Kaine to preside. You're next after Senator Johnson. I'm going to go vote,
Okay.
come back. I know Senator Flake wants to come back, and this way we'll maximize your time. Thank you for,
You mentioned a word that's dear to my heart, prioritization. I think one of the things that harms foreign aid are examples where our foreign aid is given to countries that are very corrupt and maybe supporting programs. And the converse of, or the opposite of what Senator Rubio asked, can you name a program to give me certainly the information or the argument where we've actually ended a program that has been unsuccessful, that we haven't been able to influence a country into better behavior?
Well, sir, let me just say, over my tenure, we have shut down 34% of our programmatic areas of investment around the world. And that's what we've needed to do to free up the resources to invest in Feed the Future, which works in 19 countries and delivers incredible and outstanding results. Specifically, I went out with my team a couple of years ago to Afghanistan. We did a comprehensive review of everything that was planned 5 years out, and we called it a sustainability review. And we removed from the game plan a number of projects that we didn't think would be financially sustainable or generate the return on investment that would have been required. And right now, I sit here and I'm very glad we did. And I don't want to name all those projects.
Tell you what, provide my office with that list.
Absolutely.
I think, again, that gives me some good information
Absolutely.
where I can say, listen, we've got a good administrator. He's looking at these programs. These are 34 that he's ended appropriately so. But also, let's keep going on in terms of prioritization. I know, looking at your budget request, you've got about $500 million targeted toward global climate change initiative. Now, I think when you were before a subcommittee in appropriations committee in which I served, we talked about Bjorn Lomborg, somebody whose writings I respect an awful lot because he's really looking at prioritization of spending, what you were talking about earlier. What do you get the most bang for the buck on? And he's written a pretty good book, Cool It, that certainly argues that we're far better off spending money on malaria prevention, addressing the problems of HIV and AIDS, freshwater initiatives, provide fresh water for populations, as opposed to spending money on global warming, on climate change initiatives. So can you speak to that? That's 3% of your budget being allocated to something that, somebody like Bjorn Lomborg is really scratching his head saying that you're far better off spending money elsewhere.
Well, we can. First I just want to, just so I'm clear about what our priorities are, our largest area of investment at USAID is health at $2.7 billion. When you do the all-in and include the HIV program, it's $8 billion a year. Food is the next largest at about $2.5 billion, and that includes the Feed the Future program that invests in agriculture, so our food aid is no longer needed.
So again, here's another $500 million for climate change that maybe could be put toward the food initiative that Senator Corker was saying was incredibly effective.
Well, and we have $800 million for education, $600 million for water, and our energy programs, which are often characterized and are part of the President's climate change initiative, are growing in the budget. And it's because access to clean energy in country after country is just critical for development. I was in the Democratic Republic of Congo. They have 9% energy access. They want, hydropower. They want off-grid energy solutions for local communities. And we work on all of those issues. And those are also, by the way, as we carry them out and implement them, they're going to be carbon reduction strategies as well.
I mean, hydropower is very cost effective. I like that concept. Solar power is not economically feasible. Wind power is double the price of other type of generated power. So again, so again, I'm just asking the question, where is this money being spent? Is it being spent wisely? Is it better spent in other areas?
I think it is being spent wisely, and I'd also point out, when we're looking in the communities we're looking at, people actually pay a huge amount of money for diesel generation for power and energy in places where there's no systemic access. In that context, small-scale energy solutions, off-grid solutions that rely on solar, wind, and other sources are extraordinarily cost-effective for those communities
Okay.
in those contexts. But this is exactly the kind of math we do to make sure that we're investing in things, not just because we want to invest in things that have the highest return on investment, which we do, but ultimately we're making an initial investment, and countries themselves have to sustain these systems over time. And like we did in Afghanistan, we want to be sustainable in how we carry out this work. And I give a lot of credits to our team for bringing that kind of sophisticated analysis and ROI thinking to how we do this work, and in particular carrying out cost-effectiveness analysis on these major programs and how they're implemented.
Okay. Again, thank you for your question, for your answers.
Thank you.
Thank you, Administrator Shaw. Good to be with you today. Just 3 comments and then a set of questions around Syria and humanitarian relief. Senator Cardin and others talked about Global Development Lab. Really excited about that project, and congratulations on a successful rollout. I was in Palestine recently and met with technology entrepreneurs that are really benefiting because of work with USAID, and it's not only creating economic opportunities, but some strong regard for our country. You are a good ambassador in that way. I echo Senator Menendez's concern about the Latin America budget. You know, and it's a combination of things. When we see the Latin America line items going down, when we see there's currently 10 U.S. ambassadors in Latin America, ambassadorial positions that are unfilled. Some of that is on the White House, but some of it is on people languishing on the floor of the Senate. The Southcom region of our defense has been hit very hard by austerity politics and are having to reduce their drug interdictions as a result. The combined message that we seem to be sending, while each of these might have their own explanation, is that Latin America isn't really a place of importance to us. And just because it's not a place of importance to us doesn't mean it's not a place of importance to China, to Iran, to Russia. Russia's doing military exercises in the Caribbean for the first time in 20 years. And I really worry about this. And so I just want to echo what the chair said. I want to ask you about Syria. The committee 2 weeks ago and the full Senate last week passed a resolution, SR 384, dealing with humanitarian aid in Syria. The U.S. is the largest provider of humanitarian aid to Syrian refugees outside Syria, $1.7 billion in aid. Much of the aid has been delivered through NGOs and the UN to refugees who have fled across the border, primarily in Turkey, Lebanon, and Jordan, to a lesser degree in Iraq and Egypt. We passed a resolution last week picking up on the UN Security Council resolution of February 22, saying now is the time for cross-border delivery of humanitarian aid. There's 3 million refugees outside Syria, but there's 9 million people in need of humanitarian assistance inside Syria. The UN has indicated that unimpeded access cross-border is now something that is supported by the United Nations Security Council. And our resolution of last week called on the administration to bring back to us within 90 days a plan for how we're going to be more aggressive in the delivery of humanitarian aid. What do you see as the potential role of USAID in facilitating a more aggressive humanitarian strategy to deal with this suffering?
Well, thank you, Senator. Thank you for your leadership on such a broad range of issues and your partnership. On Syria in particular, I hope more Americans can see that the $1.7 billion we've provided is making a huge difference. It is reaching 4.2 million people inside of Syria. It's reaching the 2.5 million refugees, as you point out, that are a tremendous and unsustainable crisis to their neighboring countries in Jordan and Lebanon in particular. And within Syria, as you point out, 3.5 million of the 9 you referenced are essentially not reachable because of the current constraints placed on how aid is provided. In that context, USAID has been actually the world leader in providing cross-border assistance. And the UN Security Council resolution calls for UN agencies to do the same, was agreed to by the whole Security Council, and per Valerie Amos's report presented at the end of March, essentially shows that the Syrian regime has not allowed for the terms of that Security Council to be met at any reasonable scale. There has been, I think, a few convoys across the Qamishli border that was done in coordination with the Syrians, but that is a small and very incremental step given that there are 3.5 million people that could be reached that are not being reached because the terms of that resolution are not being implemented as aggressively as necessary by the regime. So we are currently the main provider of cross-border assistance. That assistance has allowed us to provide surgeries and medical support to 250,000 injured Syrians in the north and the south and in places that other partners aren't reaching. And I just want to say, in this setting, I want to recognize Syrian-American doctors and other humanitarian actors who have risked their lives to do some extraordinary work in that context. But we need to do more. We need the UN agencies to do more, and we need ultimately the Syrian regime to abide by what's in the UN Security Council resolution to allow for that.
Well, I was at a meeting with Save the Children, one of the many NGOs that does work inside Syria, this morning, and we were talking about the fact that the regime is not allowing access in accord with the Security Council resolution. An important thing for the administration, I think, to understand in terms of Congress. While there's complicated feelings here in Congress about Syria, and particularly that was demonstrated in the vote about authorization of military force in August, there are not complicated feelings about humanitarian assistance. The humanitarian resolution that we passed came out of this committee unanimously. It passed out of the Senate unanimously. We wouldn't be providing $1.7 billion of aid if it was controversial in Congress. So as the administration wrestles with what is the next step to try to make the Syria policy more effective, take advantage of the fact that you have a Congress that is unanimous about the aggressive delivery of humanitarian aid, including cross-border aid. That's something where we're with you, and there's not controversy about it, and so I think there's much more that can be done in that area.
Well, thank you, and that is wonderful to hear, because just tomorrow I'm convening my counterparts from other donor countries to basically ask them to do more of this type of cross-border work, and it's good to know that there's support for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator King, for presiding. Senator Flake.
Thank you. I appreciate your testimony here. And as I sit here, I do want to respond to some of the comments made earlier. The chairman started off talking about the Cuba issue and said, I'll just paraphrase something like, it is dumb, and even dumber to essentially shield Cuba from the influences that we have on other dictatorial regimes and authoritarian regimes. I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. And that's why I've opposed our policy on Cuba for so long. Another senator mentioned that Iran is the only country less free than Cuba. But even in Iran, we don't shield the people of Iran from the influences, or the government of Iran from the influences of Americans traveling there. We encourage it. North Korea, if their government would allow more of it, we would encourage more of it. Where more Americans, not just Dennis Rodman, would travel there. And we have a similar situation with Cuba. We have Oliver Stone going down there and praising the education system in Cuba. If we had Bob from Peoria or Frank from Des Moines, they would say no such thing, because they'd realize that it's a different world than is described by some who travel there. So I for the life of me, can't understand why, when our goal is to expose Cubans and the Cuban government to American influence, we cut off our arm and both feet here by denying ordinary Americans, everyday Americans, the ability to travel freely there. Now, I have no doubt that if we opened up the travel ban, suspended it, ended it, the Cuban government would try to be more selective on who they allow to come to Cuba. They're all about control. But if somebody's going to limit my travel, it should be a communist, not this government. And that's the broader problem and issue I have with our whole policy writ large regarding Cuba. Specifically with this one, I do have issues. And not with the fact that we have programs like this going, but the fact that they're conducted by USAID. You can say, till you're blue in the face, well, hey, this is something that we should have known about, or it's been authorized, it's legal. We would argue back and forth whether it's covert or simply discreet, but that doesn't shield the fact that it's ill-advised for USAID, that has a role, as you described it properly, to provide humanitarian relief and encourage democratic development around the country, or around the world, because that benefits us and them in the long term. It benefits U.S. interests as well. But when we have programs elsewhere in the world, just to describe some of the things USAID is doing. We're providing humanitarian relief to those in South Sudan. We have supplies coming from Nairobi to South Sudan. Tough stuff. We're working with partners inside Syria. We may not have people on the ground there, but we do in neighboring countries. This is serious stuff. What are we doing to our USAID programs around the world when they hear there are covert or discreet programs like this going on by USAID? Do you have any concern that this program in Cuba jeopardizes our programs elsewhere in the world? Like I said, I'm not questioning whether or not we should do this. I'm just questioning where we're doing it.
Well, Senator, I appreciate, and I think your remarks illustrate that there's a debate, a policy debate, on the overall policy. With respect to the implementation of the program, what I can assure you is that our implementation is consistent with the authorizations and appropriations language that has directed us to do this. And by that, I mean they are not covert. They are intended to provide access to open information. They're consistent with programs we conduct as part of our efforts in a number of other countries around the world as part of supporting democratic and open governments and societies and civil society actors. And at the end of the day, I believe that our mission to end extreme poverty requires a broad, open society to participate in that task. So I appreciate your mention of South Sudan and Syria, where our people are conducting, I believe, heroic, world-leading, and modern technology-enabled
But if I could, I understand that, but if I can get back to Cuba, I have limited time here. I question, like I said, we can argue whether it's discreet or covert, but when we look at the description of the program here, look at some of these text messages that we hired people to write, a satirist, apparently from somewhere in South America, to write some of these. And I'm reading a few that we have access to. Latest, this is a tweet sent out under this program.
Well,
Cuban.
May I just say, I think, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, sir, I do think this program is no longer operational. Okay. I've asked my team to review the content that we're seeing in the various AP stories because we know the intent of the program was to support open information.
Along those lines, will we have access to all of the tweets or the messages that were sent by USAID or its contractors in full, so we can judge here? Because we have to determine, we have to provide oversight, whether we authorize programs or fund them. Will we have access to these?
So I've asked my team to review the documents. Most of these documents are not in our possession. They're in the possession of a grantee and a subpartner.
But surely.
So they will gather.
But you have access.
So they will gather them. They will gather them, review them, and we will make our findings available to you. Absolutely.
No, I don't necessarily. I'm not interested in your findings. I'm interested in the data. Sure. And I think we need to make decisions.
Yeah, no, we will make the data available. Absolutely.
So we will have access to each of these tweets or messages that were sent out by AID or its contractors.
You'll have access to what we're able to gather, absolutely.
Because my concern is, we had programs like this dating back. I'm not pointing fingers at this administration. I think this administration has done some good things in further broadening allowable travel, allowable categories for travel. So I applaud this administration for doing that. Much better, in my view, than the last administration, the Republican administration in this regard. But the last administration had, for example, for a while, a ticker, at the U.S. interest section in Cuba, where messages were put up that were really, the only way to describe them charitably was juvenile. It would chide the Cubans for not providing school lunches for their kids when those were provided in Miami, for example. And it was just juvenile things that I don't think served anybody's purposes. And this seems
Sir,
to
I
smack of
can't
that.
really speak to
as
what
a
the last
problem.
administration
No. But this, I'm saying, we're continuing with things like that. It smacks of that kind of program. I'm not making a political point, Republican versus Democrat. I'm just saying our policy is wrong. Let's simply allow Americans to travel to Cuba, and we would achieve, in my view, this isn't your call to make, it's ours in Congress, but I think if we have the information from this program to actually review it and then make a decision, do we want to continue to fund programs like this that, in my view, might put USAID contractors or individuals from other countries, including Cuba, that participate in this program in danger? For what? I'm not sure what we get out of this.
Well, sir,
allow Americans to travel, allow them to take flash drives, allow them to actually go and do good, instead of saying, no, you can't travel. We're going to shield the Cuban government from the influences that come with American travel. And I don't see American travel as some kind of a reward for good behavior on behalf of the Cuban government. We're unlikely to see that. It's finally a get-tough policy, in my view, with the Cuban government. My time is well spent.
Sir,
so I
just
appreciate the indulgence, but
Yeah.
if the chairman wants you to go ahead.
If I may just say, the FY14 language is very clear about the purpose and authorization for these programs, as well as which agencies should be in the lead for their implementation. And we intend to follow the law. In that case, it transitions some of those efforts to the National Endowment for Democracy. And there's a larger policy debate here, but I just want to come back to assuring you that we believe our implementation in the past of these programs has been consistent with the law, and that these are not covert. They have been publicly notified a number of times.
Thanks, Senator. Administrator, do you conduct Internet access programs in other countries in the world?
We do.
Do you have an idea?
And at the direction of specific language in the congressional.
Do you have an idea
requirements.
of how many of those are?
I wouldn't want to give you an inaccurate number, but they're part of what we do everywhere around the world, and Internet access is one component of it, is supporting civil society so that you have an open and inclusive approach to development in a number of different contexts.
Because a society that can come together and share what its goals are is part of the information as to what sustainable programs we might be able to support. So I'd like you to give the chair a list of all the Internet access programs you conduct. I may ask you for the same thing Senator Flake has asked for all of those programs. Because it seems to me we are either going to judge whether or not we are going to be supportive of Internet access in the world or not. And I think it's consistently unfair that one set of democracy programs has the greatest scrutiny of the federal government to the absence of all others. So as the authorizing committee, I think we want to see what's happening across the entire spectrum. And I would ask you to give me information about all of those programs and all of the programming of those programs and all of the tweets and all of the emails and everything so that we can make an informed judgment here. And the chair is of the view, as the authorizing committee, that either we believe in these programs collectively, which I generally think I do, and in which case we'll support it, not pick and choose which country deserves openness and which country does not, as it relates to Internet access, and whether or not AID is the appropriate entity. I mean, I think AID, as part of its overall development program, that the democracy programs that have been run by AID are critical. And so I'm not one to advocate having AID all of a sudden be stripped of its democracy programs. Because democracy programs in and of itself, generally speaking, maybe there are in some open societies in which we seek to strengthen democratic institutions, but there are many in which they are not, which is why we're having democracy programs in the first place. So these are not governments that are receptive at the end of the day, they're governments that oppose. And just as the Voice of America and a whole host of other surrogate broadcasting was meant to try to create open information to people in different parts of the world, it seems to me that what we're trying to do is do exactly that, for which we have a global perspective, an understanding of the value of those programs, and a commitment to it. And those commitments shouldn't be decided by pick and choosing which country we somehow like and which countries we don't. If they fail to provide their people access to the basic flow of information, it seems to me that we should be pursuing it. So I'd like the information on all the programs.
Mr. Chairman.
If I'll finish. Also, let me just say, I'd like to get a full sense of all your democracy programs beyond the Internet as well, because we're going to judge all of those in context as well. And maybe I'll ask for GAO and Inspector General reports on some of them. Because there is, in my mind, a siege mentality. I respect that there is a difference of opinion as to what our policy should be. What I don't respect is the siege upon one part of our democracy programs to the exclusion of all others. So that's something that we're going to have a full spectrum analysis of. Senator Flake, did you have something else?
Yeah, I was just going to clarify, this particular program was not to provide Internet access. It was social media content within the access that already exists, right?
This program was designed to provide access to information and create a platform for people to communicate
Right,
with each
but
other.
it wasn't. It didn't provide Internet access to any Cuban who didn't have it before, correct?
I don't want to misspeak, so I will I'll let my team respond later. The program was intended to provide open access to information and a platform to communicate with each other.
Thank you.
Clearly, it was a basis which didn't exist because people flocked to it when they had the opportunity. If they had some other venue, they would have used some other venue. You know, there is telephone access inside of Cuba. Telefónica of Spain has it. Problem is that the regime blocks the access to both the Internet and to these platforms. And so that's the challenge of a regime, as other regimes in the world, that simply don't want to allow its people to have information, because when they have information, they may suddenly decide to make choices or to peacefully protest or to try to create change in their government, which we generally in the world have seen. We look at Turkey and what it's doing, and the world has come down on Turkey for what's happening there. We look at Iran and what has happened there. We look at China and the challenges there. So, and we condemn those, but in Cuba, somehow the Cuban people don't deserve that flow of information. So we're going to have a broad range of judgment here as it goes along. One final note. I know that Senator Flake has a different view. Senator Durbin expressed some of that too. But the problem is that when you do travel to Cuba, and there are millions of people going to Cuba, millions, Europeans, Latin Americans, Canadians, and others, and yet the regime has become not less repressive, but more repressive and more selective. And when you travel and go, you end up feeding who? Unfortunately, not the Cuban people, but the regime. Why? Because the regime is the one that has, through its company, Gamesa, which is basically owned by the military and Raul Castro's son, the entities by which those who go visit and largely stay at, are either with a foreign partner in which Gamesa is the other side, or with entities that are totally owned by the military through a front company. So we ultimately feed the regime versus feed the people. So this is a legitimate debate. We have different views, but what should not be a debate, in my view, in this context, is the nature of our democracy programs and creating access to information to people anywhere in the world. With the thanks of the committee, we'll keep this record open for questions to the end of tomorrow, Friday, and this hearing is adjourned.